another deep dive into uncharted knowledge. Today we are tackling a topic that's always had me super curious.
Oh, yeah.
This whole idea of costs and rewards, but not in the usual sense.
Right?
We're talking about the path of spiritual cultivation,
Yeah.
specifically through the lens of Zhuan Falun, the fourth talk.
That's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because, in everyday life, we're all about rewards, right? The new phone, the job promotion, even just that perfectly brewed cup of coffee.
Those little wins that keep us going right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But when it comes to spiritual practice, it gets a little less clear.
Definitely less tangible.
So what are those rewards? And more importantly, what's the price tag Zhuan Falun talks about?
Well, you've hit on a key point right there, this idea of a price tag, because one of the most intriguing things Zhuan Falun does is it turns our usual ideas about cost completely on their head.
Okay, how so?
We tend to think of giving in a very material sense, right? Donating to charity, volunteering our time, maybe giving up something for Lent.
Right, makes sense.
But in this context, the cost is way deeper. It all comes down to our attachments.
Attachments. See, now even that word makes me think I need to declutter my apartment.
Sure, but this isn't about clearing out your closet.
Gotcha.
It's about clearing out the clutter in your heart and mind. You see, Zhuan Falun argues that real spiritual progress depends on letting go of attachments. And that can even include things we usually see as positive.
What do you mean? Like what?
Even love, for example.
Hold on, love. As in love for family, love for your partner. You're saying those emotions can actually hold us back spiritually.
It's not that love itself is a bad thing, but it's the attachment to that love, the clinging, the craving, that can trip us up on our spiritual journey.
Okay, so it's not about not loving, it's about how we love.
Exactly. Zhuan Falun suggests that when our happiness depends too much on anything or anyone, even those we love most, we set ourselves up for suffering because, let's face it, things change.
That's for sure. So then how do we even begin to loosen the grip on those deep-seated attachments?
That's where karma comes in and how Zhuan Falun connects it to hardship.
Okay, karma. Now we're getting into some really interesting territory. So
Yeah.
walk me through this. How does karma fit into this whole costs and rewards equation?
Think of it this way. Karma, according to Zhuan Falun, is kind of like a spiritual ledger. Every action we take that's driven by attachment, whether it's greed, jealousy, or even that clinging love we were talking about, leaves a karmic imprint.
So every action driven by attachment adds to this ledger.
Precisely. That imprint, that residue, it becomes part of the cost we carry with us.
So it's like accumulating karmic debt with every attachment-driven action.
You could say that.
Hmm.
But here's where the cost part takes a really interesting turn. Zhuan Falun suggests that we can actually transform that karma, shift that balance through hardship. But there's a catch.
A catch. There's always a catch.
Yeah.
All right, I'm intrigued. Lay on me.
It's not hardship just for the sake of suffering.
So it's not like a spiritual boot camp where we're supposed to go out and seek out suffering.
No, not at all. It's all about how we react internally to those challenges. Zhuan Falun uses the example of dealing with physical discomfort during meditation.
Okay, I can relate to that. My knees are killing me after like 5 minutes.
Right. So picture this. You're sitting there, legs aching back, screaming at you. The urge to adjust even just a little is almost unbearable.
Oh, tell me about it.
But Zhuan Falun says that if we push through that pain with the right mindset, one of acceptance, understanding that it's temporary, we can actually transform that black matter of karma into white matter, which represents virtue.
So it's like we're taking that negative energy, that karmic debt, and turning it into something positive, something that benefits our spiritual growth.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to admit this is a very different way of looking at challenges. But how do we know we're responding with the right mindset? Is there a cheat sheet for this?
Wouldn't that be nice? Sadly, no cheat sheet for this one. But Zhuan Falun really stresses cultivating virtues like compassion, patience, forbearance, qualities that can help us navigate those tough moments with grace and understanding, even when it's incredibly hard.
So it's not about suppressing those negative emotions, but about transforming them, learning to respond differently.
You got it. It's about recognizing that we always have a choice in how we react.
This is fascinating stuff, but I have to ask,
What's on your mind?
if hardship is the key to this transformation, does that mean that every little annoyance, every frustrating encounter is somehow orchestrated for our spiritual growth? Like, what about that coworker who seems to make it their mission to push your buttons? Or the driver who cuts you off in traffic? Are those deliberate tests on our path to enlightenment?
Well, Zhuan Falun seems to say those little annoyances, they might not be so random after all. It frames them as opportunities to practice those very virtues we were just talking about.
So that coworker who's always pushing your buttons, they're like your unexpected spiritual sparring partner.
You could say that instead of getting riled up, try responding with compassion, with understanding.
It's not about being a pushover, though, right?
Definitely not. It's about recognizing that, hey, everyone's fighting their own internal battles.
So it's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. Maybe they're just up to their eyeballs in their own karmic stuff, and we have a choice. Do we jump in with them, or do we lend a hand to help pull them out? Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Love that. And the best part is this perspective. It changes how we see those challenges. Instead of roadblocks, Zhuan Falun says, hey, see these as stepping stones on your path.
That is a powerful shift. Makes those tough days a little easier to swallow. But what about those challenges that hit a little closer to home? What about conflicts in our closest relationships, say, with a spouse or partner? How does Zhuan Falun deal with that?
Well, it actually spends a lot of time on the role of spouses in cultivation, recognizes it can be a really tough area, suggests that while these conflicts are hard, they're also full of potential for growth for both people involved.
Okay, now that's interesting. So what's the key to navigating those potential relationship landmines when one person is really diving deep into spiritual practice and the other maybe not so much?
Zhuan Falun suggests that coming at it with compassion and understanding, just like we talked about with that difficult coworker, that's crucial. It's about realizing that we're all on our own paths, and sometimes those paths, they don't quite line up even in a marriage.
Right, like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, spiritually speaking.
Mm.
But Zhuan Falun also talks about the danger of spiritual shortcuts, trying to skip over the hard work of inner cultivation.
hmm
Is there a connection there with these relationship challenges?
There's a really interesting link there. See, when we run into these conflicts, whether it's with a coworker or a spouse, we often want a quick fix. We want them to just get it, to understand and support our spiritual path immediately. But Zhuan Falun warns against that kind of thinking, that desire for instant enlightenment for ourselves and others.
So no spiritual shortcuts.
Yeah.
No waving a magic wand to make our problems disappear. And no expecting our partners to magically transform into enlightened beings overnight.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that real spiritual growth, it's a process, and it looks different for everyone. And sometimes those different paces, they cause friction in relationships. But Zhuan Falun says instead of seeing those frictions as failures, see them as chances for deeper understanding and compassion.
It's about meeting people where they are on their journey, even if it means agreeing to disagree sometimes or finding a compromise that respects both paths.
Exactly. And this whole idea of avoiding shortcuts, it ties into another fascinating thing. Zhuan Falun explores the mandala.
Mandorla.
Yep.
Okay, now we're getting into some seriously mystical territory. I have to admit, I had to look that one up. For those of us who haven't bumped into that word before, can you give us a crash course?
Absolutely. In simple terms, the mandorla is an energy field, often shown as a halo or aura, that surrounds spiritually advanced beings. Think of those classic pictures of Buddha or Jesus with that radiant light around them.
So it's not just a cool visual in religious art. There's actually something more to it.
That's what Zhuan Falun suggests. It describes the mandorla as a real energy field that grows as a practitioner, cultivates their inner world, purifying their thoughts, their actions, and ultimately their energy. And here's where it gets really interesting. Zhuan Falun states that a huge chunk, 80% in fact, of the energy we cultivate through spiritual practice goes toward enriching this mandorla.
80%, that's a major investment. So what's so important about this mandorla? What does it do for us on our spiritual journey?
According to Zhuan Falun, it's not just about gathering energy, it's about what that energy helps us achieve. Think of the mandorla as the foundation for our own paradise.
Okay, a personal paradise. Now you're speaking my language. Tell me more about this spiritual oasis.
Imagine a state of being where your thoughts become reality, where you have access to unlimited wisdom and compassion, where limitations vanish and you can fully embody your true enlightened self.
Wow, that sounds like the ultimate reward.
Yeah.
But how does this mandorla, this energy field, actually get us there?
It's not so much that the mandorla transports us to this paradise, but that it becomes the very fabric of that paradise. As we cultivate our energy and character, this inner world, this mandorla, it gets more and more refined and powerful. Eventually, it transforms into a realm of incredible beauty and spiritual fulfillment.
It's like we're building our own inner sanctuary brick by spiritual brick, and this mandorla is both the foundation and the blueprint for that project.
Exactly. And the beauty is this building process, this cultivation of our mandorla, it's not some far-off goal. It's something we can do right now in every single moment. Every act of kindness, every time we choose compassion over anger, every time we face hardship with grace, we're adding another layer of refinement to our mandorla, to our personal paradise.
I love how Zhuan Falun takes what we usually think of as costs, hardship, letting go of attachments, the daily grind of spiritual practice, and shows them as investments in something truly amazing, something that goes way beyond our physical existence.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. But speaking of costs, and that temptation to bypass them, Zhuan Falun also talks about a specific practice that's often mistaken for a shortcut, the idea of anointment.
Anointment. I've heard of that in a religious context, but I'll
Hmm.
be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the specifics.
Yeah.
What does anointment actually involve, and how does Zhuan Falun see it?
In a lot of spiritual traditions, anointment is seen as a ritual where a master or teacher bestows spiritual energy or blessings on a student.
So it's like a spiritual head start,
Yeah.
a way to fast track your progress.
That's often how it's seen, yeah. But Swan Falun takes a more nuanced view. While it acknowledges that the practice has its place, it warns against seeing it as a quick fix or a replacement for genuine inner cultivation.
So it's not as simple as getting tapped on the head by a guru
Yeah.
and instantly becoming enlightened.
Not quite. Swan Falun emphasizes that true spiritual progress can't come from someone else. It comes from our own efforts, from the consistent work of purifying our thoughts, letting go of attachments, and cultivating virtues.
So anointment done authentically is more like recognizing the work a student has already done, acknowledging their progress,
Yeah.
and maybe offering some guidance for what's ahead.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about being handed enlightenment on a silver platter. It's about realizing how important it is to find a true path and commit to the journey.
It's about doing the work plain and simple. No shortcuts, no magic tricks, just a steady, often challenging, but ultimately deeply rewarding path of inner cultivation.
Exactly. And that brings us right back to the core of Zhuan Falun's message about costs and rewards. The real cost is our willingness to face our own limitations, to let go of how our ego thinks things should be, and the greatest reward, the boundless freedom and wisdom that come from aligning ourselves with who we truly are.
It's about trading in our limited ego-driven desires for the infinite potential that's inside each of us.
Beautifully put. And that, my friend, is a reward worth working for.
Absolutely. But before we get too comfy in our metaphorical paradise, we've got to wrap up this deep dive. But don't worry, we'll be back soon for another plunge into uncharted knowledge. So as we start to resurface from this deep dive into Zhuan Falun's take on costs and rewards, something's been on my mind.
Oh, yeah. What are you thinking?
Well, we've covered so much attachments, karma, the mandala, even those spiritual shortcuts. It's a lot to take in. So for someone who's just dipping their toes into these ideas, maybe even feeling a little overwhelmed, what's the one thing you'd want them to remember, that one golden nugget they can carry with them?
That's a great question and a perfect way to bring this all back down to earth. If there's one thing I hope people take away from our Zhuan Falun deep dive, it's this. Real spiritual growth isn't about collecting knowledge or doing rituals. It's about transforming ourselves from inside out. And that all starts with recognizing those attachments that keep us stuck in suffering.
It's like that deep decluttering of the heart and mind, not just rearranging the furniture in our external lives.
Exactly. It's about looking at those tough times, those difficult relationships, not as punishments, but as opportunities to grow. It's about choosing compassion over resentment, patience over frustration, understanding that everyone's on their own path, even that coworker who drives us up the wall.
It's like we're all in this together,
Yeah.
even when it feels like we're navigating rough seas on our own.
And maybe most importantly, it's about embracing the whole journey, the ups and downs, the twists and turns, because it's in those challenging moments, those times when we want to give up, that we find our strength, our resilience, our capacity for love and compassion.
It's like we're all diamonds in the rough, and those challenges, those moments of friction are what polishes into our most radiant selves.
What a beautiful way to put it. You know what else is interesting? Zhuan Falun suggests that this inner refinement, this letting go of attachments and cultivating virtue, it doesn't just affect us personally, it creates a ripple effect, impacting not just ourselves, but the world around us.
So you're saying that just by doing our own inner work, we're contributing to a collective shift in consciousness.
Exactly. And how inspiring is that? By choosing compassion over anger, by meeting challenges with grace and understanding, we're not just making our own little corner of the world brighter, but adding to a larger tapestry of peace and harmony.
It's like we each have a piece of the puzzle, and as we work on our own pieces, the ones around us start falling into place too.
I love that. It really speaks to how connected everything is. We're not isolated beings, we're threads in a huge and intricate web.
And those threads, those connections, they go way beyond the here and now, don't they? We talked about the mandorla as this personal paradise we're building within ourselves. But Zhuan Falun seems to hint at something even bigger, something beyond this physical life.
It's true. Zhuan Falun describes a realm of unimaginable beauty and spiritual fulfillment where suffering ends and our true nature is fully realized.
It reminds us that this life, this journey we're on right now is just one chapter in a much longer story.
Exactly. And even though we don't have all the answers, even though the path ahead might seem unclear, sometimes there's comfort in knowing we're not alone.
And that the rewards are so much greater than the costs, even if we can't always see them right now. Well said. I think it's time for us to come up for air on this deep dive. But as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep searching for those pearls of wisdom that resonate with your soul. Until next time, duck drivers.